The Radeon 9700 Pro. Some people consider this one of the great graphics cards in computer graphics cards history. It came out in 2002 and it basically blew the competition, namely Nvidia, out of the water, especially when we're talking about things like anti-aliasing. In most benchmarks, it topped their kind of flagship, the GeForce 4 4600 Ti, and it even went on to top a lot of their next generation cards in the FX series. So, yeah, this is the 9700 Pro. As you can see, standard heatsink and fan. If there was a drawback to this card, it would be that it did tend to overheat. It did tend to run a little hot, even with the stock heatsink and fan. But was there other options? And what if you were a type of PC ninja and you just wanted things to be really quiet? You weren't a big fan of fans. Well, there was a solution for you. Alright, let's check out this fan and how noisy it may be. Well, the computer's obviously being... Here's something else about this card. It has another power connector. Nice little warning, I forgot all about it. Actually, it's really cool that it tells you what's going on the screen rather than just beeping, and then if you don't think about it, it's easy to forget about. See it right there? Yep, I forgot about it. God, seriously? Nope, and it's connected right down to the... just won't reach. God damn it. Alright, well, thankfully I had one of these just sitting around. Turns a regular Molex into the floppy type connector, and then we just connect it. And there, now it should work fine. Is that the fan in there or the fan in the graphics card? Anyways, I don't think it's loud at all, but some people just don't want fans. Or actually, it's not. Yeah, that weird sound is the fan. Well, there's another point. Fans tend to die. The bearings wear out, and they tend to not spin very fast, and so they either make some noise when they're working, or they make noise when they're not working. So sometimes you just don't really want a fan on a graphics card. Actually, just in that short amount of time that it was running, it's pretty warm. So how can we address this? Alright, well, I will show you. I present to you the Radeon 9700 Pro Atlantis. Well, at least the heatsink off one. So yeah, this is a giant monstrous heatsink, and this isn't all, there's more parts to it actually. And this was for passive cooling. Now, this did come on a different name that you could get this cooler, and it wasn't necessarily just for the 9700 Pro. There was even a later version that had 2 heat pipes, and I forget exactly what name that cooler went under, but there was actually a version of the 9700 called like the Atlantis, and it actually came factory with the cooler already installed. So I ended up getting one of these cards really cheap at like a recycling, like a parts store, and it had this monstrous cooler on it, and I didn't even know what card it was at the time, but the cooler just looked so awesome. I picked it up, and the card was dead, which I don't know if that tells you too much about the cooler, or if it, it was just old and it died. But yeah, it was dead, but I saved the cooler. And what I'm going to do in this video, I am going to take this cooler and I'm going to transplant it onto that 9700 Pro, which the fan on that heatsink seems to be dying anyways. So this will be interesting, and then we'll see. Well, I'll just show you the process. I don't really have any equipment for testing heat and temperature and stuff, but we'll see how it goes. Now, the 9700 Pro that did come with the Atlantis cooler on it in the first place, it also had heat sinks for the RAM, kind of big heat sinks that went across. I don't have those. I guess I forgot to pry them off when I tossed that card because it was dead, but you could use something like these. These are real cheap on eBay, these little aluminum heat sinks. And then you can do something like thermal glue. It doesn't have to be like expensive, fancy stuff, and just kind of affix them on. You probably want to do that first. So I'm going to do that now, and then I'm going to let it cure, harden, and then we'll, well, actually, maybe I should try to remove this thing first, and then we'll do that. All right, so here we go with the heatsink and fan off. Now, fortunately, they used one of those gross like thermal pads that have completely like encrusted and turned into concrete most of the time. So you really got to be careful. First, remember you got those two these things that are going through the heatsink and connecting in the back. So you kind of want to either cut them off or squish them and then pull them out, and then you just kind of want to gently pry the heatsink off. And finally, you just want to clean up, try to get as much of that gunk off as you can, you know, rubbing alcohol and just rubbing it down, or like a scraper to scrape it off. But sometimes it can be really encrusted on there. Now, at this point, I do not know if the chip was damaged in my efforts to take off the heatsink, which is always frustrating. So we won't know that until we put on the Atlantis passive cooler heatsink and put it in a machine and boot it up. So after we do all the work, we will not know if the chip was damaged in the heatsink removal process. But most of the time, I've had pretty good luck, knock on wood, with taking off these heat sinks and the chip being relatively okay. So I'm just going to try to clean that up a little bit more, and then I'm going to put on the heat sinks on the RAM chips. And just remember to always be careful when you G-force the heatsink off. Wait, wrong card. Damn it! Alright, so I'm just going to apply a little bit of this thermal glue, and then I'm going to place the heat sinks on. And forgot this thing is sealed, secondly, so 1 second. And whoop, there we go. Alright, so you probably just want a small dot, just like when you're applying any other kind of thermal paste. It's probably a little bit too much, but alright, well, this is time consuming, so I'll get back to you once that's done. Alright, so here we go, and I've let these sort of dry overnight, and they seem pretty well attached. So there's our little cheapo heat sinks connected. So I guess the next thing you're gonna do is, there's this little front plate, and then there's this too, and this just kind of goes over that, and then I'm just gonna put it on. You want front with the arrow pointing down on the front, and then there's this plastic piece that says back with the arrow pointing down, and this would go on the back, and then these kind of screw into each other. In theory, it's been a while since I actually took this heatsink off the other card I had. I think the retail version, I'll put I can't recall it off the top of my head what this heatsink is called. It's from Zalman. Like I said, this is the version that came like factory installed on the card. The regular one you can get to put on any old card. It doesn't have this cool little sapphire thing on it. And I've seen some that are like, I don't think they're, you know, the normal metal color. They're like painted, like I've seen some that were like orange and some that were blue. And I think the back plate on those ones are metal too, and you put like a little film over it so it doesn't short anything, and you stick it on the back. It's a little bit different. I'm just saying the one you can get, the kind of the generic one, it's a little bit different. It actually looks a little bit better. But just keep in mind, this is the one that came factory on a card. They're pretty much the same, but the parts just seem a little bit different. So I'm gonna put these on, and then I'll get back to you guys. And I'm gonna use some decent Arctic Silver 5 to put on the GPU here. Alright, so that part is on. Just make sure it is screwed all the way down and tightened. And you can see the back there. It doesn't actually touch the back of the card, and it's plastic. So, but yeah, just make sure that's tightened down good. Now for these two plates here, I put a little bit of thermal paste in those grooves where the heat pipe's going to go, just to help a little bit. I've seen people doing that online. Alright, so next thing we're going to do is put in the heat pipe and just make sure it slides and lines up with the back too. Whoop. It's a little bit hard to, yeah. So, and then we're just gonna sort of, you know, that one says front, so make sure it goes on the front and the back, and then you know, you fasten them in with screws. All right, so there we go. That looks extremely impressive. So there's 2 screws on the front, and then in the back there were the 4, and then there's the heat pipe going through. It looks weird, like it's crooked at a weird angle, but it's supposed to be like that. Some of these heat sinks are almost like, I think this one is touching the larger one, but it's just like, it's barely, so it fits, it'll be okay. So yeah, there we go. Now the top, you want to secure it with these things, and you just put in the little nut, and then you line it up, and then you screw it in. So I'm going to secure that now. Alright, so there we go. It's all put together. Pretty secure. This looks really intimidating. Now, some of the benchmarks I saw from the time put this passive cooler like about 5 degrees, give or take, below what the stock cooler seemed like, which seems really weird because this thing is massive compared to the stock one, but it doesn't have a fan. It's all passive. So I don't know. It's just some sources I saw from the time. Now, there was an option to add a fan, and I guess you could rig a fan on the front, but you were supposed to kind of attach a fan on the top the same way you did this, and it would just kind of be like that, and you'd use little nuts and bolts, and you'd put the fan on there. And with the fan, apparently this was a very effective cooling solution. You could even do a little bit of extreme overclocking. So, but really the key would be to have good case airflow with this passive cooler, maybe even a case fan blowing over it. Now, I think that might defeat the purpose of it, but you might have a case fan anyway, so I guess one fan is better than having 2 fans if you really hate that sort of the noise from a fan. So now comes the fun part. We're going to install this thing, and I'm going to see if I killed the card putting this heatsink on, which is possible because I tend to do these kind of things in a very haphazard manner, so there's a very good possibility I killed the card, but we're gonna find out. Alright, we got it installed in our Pentium Dell Dimension that I use just for a lot of tests. Pentium 3 machine. That looks pretty intimidating in there. So here we go. I'm gonna be wildly optimistic on this one, and I'm gonna give it a 60% chance that it works fine. And I'll give it a 20% chance it works fine for a bit until we get into Windows, and then it screws up and dies, and I'll just give it a 20% chance that it just will not work at all. Being wildly optimistic on this one. So, okay, here we go. So I'm hitting the power button now, and I did make sure it's connected. Okay. And, okay, good. Good. Now we get to see if it's all garbled. Well, that's because Windows is shut down improperly, but okay, so it looks like it's running. So I'm going to boot up into Windows, and I'm going to run something, a benchmark or something, for a while, and then I'll come back and we'll see how hot it is and if it's died on us. Alright, well, it's been about 10 minutes, and I installed some drivers for it. And its system is quite quiet, obviously, without a fan. Really, the only sounds are the hard drive, which isn't very noisy at all, and then the CPU fan. But feeling the back isn't bad. The back isn't really hot at all. The front, yeah, I mean, it's not touch it and you scorch and burn yourself, but it is pretty hot. And all it's been doing is just installing drivers. So I'm going to run something continuously, and I'm going to step away and then come back, and we'll see what it's like. Alright, so I had, I think this is PC... Why can't I think of it? It's the PC Benchmark 2001 SE program thing. I've had it looping for like 45 minutes now. So, it's still running fine, but let me... Ow. Yeah, that's significantly hotter, even on the back. The center of the front is really scorching hot, but actually these, that's still hot, but it's not like ridiculously hot. So, I mean, it works. Obviously it's quiet. I mean, I'm always paranoid about cooling and things overheating, so this card would make me paranoid, but I think with like a PCI, like a PC slot fan next to it, or just a fan behind it blowing air across it, you'd be quite fine. Actually, what I'm going to attempt to do is try to install a fan on the top. You might be even able to rig one, you know, to the side. Another thing I need to note is this does make it wide enough where it does take up a slot on the side. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a PCI right down there that it's taken up. So it becomes from a 1 slot video card to a 2. So you might want to keep that in mind. So I'm going to take this out and I'm going to try to mount a fan on it. Alright, so here is the solution I came up with. Since I don't have the original fan or screws or nuts and bolts to hook on a fan. Now this is just a fan from a CPU. I just took this off a CPU heatsink right here. I don't know what this is. This is probably 478 socket maybe. Cooler, I don't know. But anyways, I just took the fan off and I just found the right screws that would fit in here, and they were just thick enough that they could grip in the groove there. So I'm not using you know, any like nuts and bolts. Now it is a little bit loose, but in normal operation it should be just fine. This screw I might take out and find one that's a little bit better fit. It's not quite grabbing as well as this one. This one's grabbing pretty good. But anyways, this board did not have any other fan connectors on it except for the CPU fan here, cooler fan. So what I did is since this originally came with a heatsink and fan, there is a fan header on this card, 2-prong. Now what I did, I pulled off the little plastic guide rail on it, and I have these things here, these little wires, to male to female, and I just plugged the 2 in there, and then now this is a 3-pin, but I think one of them is just ground, so I just found the 2 that were the ones for power, and it works. See, I'll hit power now, and there you go. Now obviously it's louder now, especially this fan spins really fast. It's kind of noisy. But it pretty much is a good cooling solution. I have it blowing down in there, so it should cool it fairly well. And so with this giant hulking heatsink and this fan on there, it's a pretty good cooling solution. Now, this might be a little bit high, so I don't even know if I'll be able to put the case back on it, but these Dell Dimensions use kind of a weird slimmer case, so I don't think this will be a problem in most cases, especially since originally, well, not with this Atlantis cooler that came factory installed, but when you get this kind of heatsink setup that you could put on other cards, it had the fan option. So I think it's just because this case is kind of weird that it probably won't fit when I put the cover on. But general cases it should fit, and should be great for overclocking if you want to overclock the 9700 Pro. I was actually planning on just keeping this card in this machine for general usage. I'm usually an NVIDIA guy, but this is really a nice card. When I was doing the benchmarks, it was pulling some really good numbers. But I might have to put this in a different machine since I don't think it will fit. But yeah, works pretty nice. Alright, and just so you can take a little bit better look in there, that's where the fan connector is. And then, although I don't really like how it's touching the heatsink there, and then it just goes around and you connect. See, I have a bunch of these things. They really come in handy sometimes when wires aren't short or situations like this. And I took off the little guide thing that was on there before. So, yeah, this is a nice cooler. You got to keep in mind that it does take up an extra slot. Now, like I said, you can find these for other cards from that time period too. So you don't need to specifically search out the one that came factory installed, although those are the only ones that have the nice little sapphire ATI Radeon badge. The other ones, like I said, that I've seen on eBay are like they're just blue and generic or gold generic. The later ones I think are a little bit better. They have slots and they come with 2 of the little heat pipe things, so they might actually cool a little bit better. But I don't know. This card gets really hot. This whole setup got really hot. But if you're really dead set on a retro system with a Radeon 9700 Pro or like card, you really want it to be quiet and you want to find a passive heatsink, this might be for you. Sticking a fan on it, of course this is allowed. This one I just pulled off a CPU heatsink. You could find a quieter one. I believe the regular version of this that you can find comes with the fan as an option. So with the fan on it, it's a really good cooling solution in my opinion. Great for overclocking or just, you know, a good step up from the stock one. Now, like I said, unfortunately, there's no built-in temperature sensor on this card, and I don't have any kind of temperature reading devices, so I really couldn't give exact numbers on how well it cooled. But with the fan on it, it's pretty obvious that it's a superior cooling solution to the stock fan and heatsink. So yeah. Oh, and also on a side note, it does actually fit in the Dell Dimension case. So I think I might use this as the card in there for now. So awesome. Thanks for watching the video. If you like this kind of stuff, subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next video. Oh, I was kind of wrong. I didn't put the bar on it last time. It won't say the little bar, that won't, because of the fan. But you don't need this really, but yeah, if you want to have this thing, it won't work. Oh well.